Hey,
Yeah.
the bin's getting pretty full and it's your week to take it out.
I don't know. It's not that bad. Have you ever heard of bin Jenga? There's still a bit of room left.
What about that mess on the floor? That's yours, right? That noodle cup?
Maybe.
Don't you think you should clean it up? You always leave messes around everywhere.
I think that's a bit unfair. I don't do it all the time. And you always park in my better spot anyway. So, you know my car needs to be in the cover area, but you always park there.
Well, it's not my fault. You're always too lazy to get to your early classes.
Nah, I don't. I'm a night owl. What can I say? It's just who I am.
Well, you need to get a real job. A night owl is not a real job. I'm sick of your lifestyle choices. I think you need to move out.
Fine, I don't care about your sand subscription, but I'm not staying. I'm not moving out. I'm staying right here. And scene. All right. Oh, thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. So tonight, and for the next few weeks, we're talking about crucial conversations. We just had a crucial conversation. It escalated pretty quickly. Went from being about the rubbish bin to, whether or not I should be in the living there. And crucial conversations come in many shapes or form. They're actually basing on some of the content of this book called Crucial Conversations. So if you want to dig deeper, welcome to grab the book. You just Google Crucial Conversations. It's pretty much everywhere. You can get it online. It's not a Christian book, but it has a lot of wisdom. So you'll find that there's some stuff in there that I'm not talking about, and it's all good stuff. But we're looking at how we have conversations from a scriptural point of view. And what does the Bible say about how we should have conversations? And in fact, if we look at Jesus' life, he has many crucial conversations that come up to him. Some of them surprise him. Some of the conversations we have surprise us, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in the middle of a crucial conversation, and we're like, where did that come from? Other times, they're conversations that we dread having, and there's this thing that we need to talk to someone about, and we're just not doing it because we're avoiding the person because it's uncomfortable, and it just makes the situation worse. So we're looking at that over the next few weeks, giving us tools on how to have better conversations with those around us. Before we get any further, let's just pray as we open God's Word tonight. Father, we thank you that you are a God of grace, you're a God of hope, and no matter where we're at in our life, you offer us grace and hope for a new future with you in heaven and also here on earth. Thank you that you give us peace even in the midst of situations that aren't great. But I pray you would help us by your Spirit to get better at the relationships around us. And that over the next few weeks, when we look at how to have better conversations, that you would equip us to become more like you in handling conversations around us. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen. So the question is, what makes a crucial conversation? Now, there's three elements that this book talks about that make a crucial conversation. And they are these three. And I don't know if they're in any particular order. I think I've got a slide there. The stakes are high, so the conversation's decisive, or it has a big effect moving forward. There's strong emotions. So you might find the adrenaline starts pumping, and you find you're really passionate about the thing that you're talking about. And there's opposing views as well. So often you might not see things eye to eye, like our little example earlier of the bin. And when those three things come together, you find a conversation can escalate really quickly, and it can get way out of control, and it can be blown up into something way bigger than perhaps what it is. There's a few examples that I thought of. Perhaps if you're in a job, your boss might take you into his office, and he might be like, look, I don't think you're doing a good enough job. And all of a sudden you just landed in this crucial conversation. And you're trying to defend yourself, or perhaps you don't say anything. Maybe if you were at school, you might discover at lunchtime that a friend's been posting about you on TikTok or Instagram, or a so-called friend, shall I say, and words got around and you found out about it. All of a sudden you've got this thing now that you need to deal with. Or perhaps you're in a casual job and you're getting less and less hours, and you're wondering why, what's going on, and you're going to have a conversation with the boss at some point. Maybe they've forgotten about you, and you just got to go deal with that. So do you go into the shop? What do you do? You're going to have a crucial conversation about that. What's going on? Is it that I'm not good enough? What is actually going on? Perhaps you've got a group assignment at uni, and perhaps someone in the group is not pulling their weight. Perhaps when you meet in person, they're like, yep, I'll do it, and then nothing happens. And now you've got a problem that you need to deal with. You need to have a crucial conversation with that person. And of course, that can happen in our relationships as well, can't it? Perhaps you've been dating someone for a while, and you're wondering, we need to have that talk. We need to define this relationship. Is it official? Is it unofficial still? What are we doing there? Or perhaps it's on the other end of the spectrum. Perhaps you're not sure if this person's the right person for you. How do you have that conversation with that person? There's many different types of crucial conversations, aren't there? And some of them, as I've mentioned, some of them they just dump on you. And other times there's this thing that you might need to address, and you don't really want to, you don't really know how to. But they come to us everywhere. Now, to be honest, I'm not great at these conversations myself. I hope I'm getting better. Certainly being married has helped me get better at some of those things. I can think of a number of conversations over the years I've had with my wife. One of the earliest ones we had was around going to bed, and when my head hits the pillow, that's pretty much all it's going to do. It's going to fall asleep very quickly. But my wife wanted to have pillow talk and just chat about her day and about life and about big topics. And that caused a bit of conflict early in our marriage. We have since sorted that out. She knows not to try and talk to me in bed, because it's not that I got my own way, but I was just not very communicable at the end of the night. But things like that, they can create conflict in our life. And I don't think I'm great at it, but I hope you can find some tools over the next few weeks. And we're going to look at 3 tools tonight that'll help us just get better at our conversations. As we think about crucial conversations, we're going to be looking through Ephesians Chapter 4 tonight and bring out some of the gold that's in that passage on how we look at relationships with each other. So we'll go there now to Ephesians Chapter 4, and I'll read it out to you. I think we've got it on the screen there as well, Michael. This is Paul, leader in the early church, talking to the church in Ephesus. And he says, "Therefore I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. For there is one body and one Spirit, just as you have been called to one glorious hope for the future." Now these are the gifts that Christ gave to the church: the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists and pastors and teachers. Their responsibility is to equip God's people to do his work and build up the church, the body of Christ. This will continue until we all come to such unity in our faith and knowledge of Christ's Son that we'll be mature in the Lord, measuring up to the full and complete standard of Christ. Then we'll no longer be immature like children. We won't be tossed and blown about by every new wind of teaching. We will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever they sound like the truth. Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. He makes the whole body fit together perfectly. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow. So the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. Now, Paul gives us a great introduction here on how we can have conversations with those around us that honour Jesus. His primary goal here is unity in Jesus, not conformity, not that we would all agree or have the same viewpoints, that we would be unified around Jesus and what he's done for us. That's unity within the church. And he sees people functioning in their spiritual gifts, teaching us and equipping us so that we might be in unity, measuring up to the full standard of Jesus. Now that's a pretty high standard, to measure up to the full standard of Jesus, and I don't think we'll get there, or we won't get there till we're in heaven. But it doesn't mean we aren't on a journey to become more like Jesus. And if you've committed to following Jesus, then you're on that journey as well, to become better, to become more like him. And our crucial conversations, learning to be better at our conversations, is just one aspect of that, of becoming more like Jesus. And that's speaking the truth in love, as Paul puts it. And as I said, there's 3 aspects of crucial conversations we're going to look at tonight. And the first one there is looking at your heart. When it comes to conversations, addressing your heart. Because to be honest, you can't change the other person that you're having the conversation with. You can only deal with yourself, your own motives, your own heart. And I think if I was better at doing this, I'd probably be better at conversations as well. But when you realize you can't actually change the other person, and that you can only change your heart, it gives you some freedom there. It gives you some freedom in that you can't control them. You can only control yourself, your own feelings, your own motives. And Paul gives us some great help here. He says in verses 1 to 3, lead a life worthy of a calling, for you have been called by God. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, and making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. Paul challenges us to check our hearts and our motives, to be humble and gentle in our conversations, to exercise patience by loving each other and seeking unity by being at peace. Notice he doesn't say, make sure everyone else is humble and gentle. No, he says just be humble, be gentle. This should be our attitude when things get heated. Now it's interesting. We're going through a bit of a phase in our family at the moment. I have 3 boys. Three boys. I've got a 7-year-old, 9-year-old, 13. And my 2 youngest boys are going through a bit of a phase at the moment that whenever I say something or whenever one of the parents says something, it doesn't even have to be a parent, it could be anyone in the family. When anyone says something and they don't agree with it, their sentences start with no, or wait, or but. And it's, apart from being terribly grammatically, it's just, they've got no filter. They just have to come out, no, you're wrong. And it happens all the time. Goodness, it happens all the time. But I think it's a bit of a phase because it's only just started in the last month. So my 9-year-old's just started that, saying that recently. But it's so tempting even as adults. And I think perhaps growing up, we've all been through that phase. But as adults, it's so easy to be tempted to... Did people just lose me? There we go. I'm back. It's tempting even as adults to think when someone else says something you don't agree with, to just jump in and say, I don't agree with that. I think you're wrong. Even if we think it in our heart. And then often that'll come out in some way, shape or form. Could be some... If we're around that person regularly, it could be just some sarcastic comments or some jokes, some snide remarks here and there. You know, it'll all seep out eventually what's in our hearts. And so we actually need to check our hearts. Are we being humble enough to actually stop and think about the other person's viewpoint for a little bit and consider their perspective, their life experience, where they've come from? Because I think if we can do that, if we can be a little bit more humble about our conversations and check our own heart, then we're actually going to be on the way to having a healthier conversation, because we're not going to be as stirred up, because we know there's possibility we might not be right about this. Of course, it's also challenging to be humble when you know you're right, isn't it? If you know you're right, it's hard to be humble. It's hard to be gentle when you know you're right. And so if we're able to be humble enough to recognize that maybe we don't have it all together, maybe we don't know everything, or that we could possibly be wrong about something, it's easier to have a better conversation with people. And we might not necessarily be the person stirring the conversation and making it get out of control. Now, so when we're in the middle of a crucial conversation, sometimes we actually need to stop and check where we're at. What's our heart at? Are we just firing at this conversation because we know we're right? We need to make sure the other person knows that. Some of us don't do that, though. Some of us, when we find ourselves in a heated conversation, we actually take a step back and we actually step out of the conversation. And we don't say the extra 10% that perhaps we need to say to the person. And we actually just step away from the conversation. We disengage because it's getting too much. We We don't want to have a conversation. We want to be Christian civilized. We don't want an argument about something really heated. And so we step out of the conversation as well. Now, when it comes to checking our heart, there's a couple of questions that I like to ask as well. Oh, I think I've skipped. Hang on. Let me go back to where I'm up to. This is great. I love technology sometimes. Other times, not so great. Where are we? There we go. Okay. Here we go. I must have touched the screen at some point. All right. So, when we find we're in the middle of a conversation and we need to check our heart, there's a couple of questions that I like to ask. And the first one is, what do I really want to get out of this conversation? Am I just trying to win it? Winning's easy. Winning feels great. And those of us at Sports Fest on the last weekend, we know winning feels good. Well, some of us probably know winning feels good. Others probably not so much. But you experienced other people winning, didn't you? And you saw their joy. You saw their happiness. Winning's good. Winning conversations is great. But are we just trying to do that and not thinking about the relationship with the other person? You know, Paul's challenge to be gentle and humble actually helps us think through our motives a little bit. Am I trying to win a conversation? Or should I actually consider a long-term relationship with this person? And where does this conversation actually fit in the long term? It considers the longer-term aspect of this relationship. Or am I just trying to be right? Would be another question I would try to ask. Am I just trying to be right and trying to prove the other person wrong? Sometimes we actually need to exercise a bit of patience in our conversations, especially when they start to get a bit heated. We actually need to take a step back. Am I being patient with this person? Long enough to consider our relationship, not just based on this conversation, but as a longer term thing. Because sometimes maintaining a relationship with a person is actually more important than winning this conversation, winning the point. The issue right in front of you might not actually be as important as your relationship long term. And of course, when it comes to talking about our hearts, we can also have some false humility too. Now, this is something that I've experienced in my own life. I'm really quick to say sorry. My wife would tell you that. And that's actually a tool to step out of a conversation, not actually address the issue. If you say you're sorry straight away, it negates the need to have to actually deal with the issue. And that unfortunately, that seems to be where I land a lot in crucial conversations. I'm just too quick to say sorry. And that's a false humility, because it's a tool used to step out of the conversation. If I say I'm sorry, I don't need to fix anything. It's my fault. Rather than actually saying the extra 10% of what I am feeling and what I want to say. So if that's you, I encourage you to think about that. Am I just saying sorry in this conversation because I want to get out of it? Am I just apologizing because I don't want to have this conversation? Am I just avoiding saying the truth? And of course, that goes against Paul's teaching for unity here, to make every effort to stay united together. It actually goes against that, because in stepping in and saying sorry straight away and then stepping out, we're actually not making every effort to stay in unity with the person. We've conceded too easily, and we're not taking that extra 10% in the conversation. Now, the second thing when it comes to crucial conversations, that's looking at our heart. That's looking at some of our motives that go on inside our brains when we're in the middle of these conversations. And one of the things with conversations, crucial conversations, is when they're happening is not the time to talk about this stuff, or not time to think about this stuff. Because when a crucial conversation is happening, your adrenaline's pumping, your fight or flight reflex is kicking in. So the time to think about this is outside of that. It could be reflecting on conversations you've had in the past. But in the moment, there's not much you can do about that fight or flight reflex. It kicks in. So the idea is to think about this stuff, meditate on it, reflect on it, ask some questions about yourself. And hopefully, when it comes to those situations, you've built some, they call neural pathways in your head, so that you're not going to launch straight in. You've thought about this, you've thought about what you're going to do, and you can actually react in a slightly different way, in a more healthier way. Now, the second thing with crucial conversations is our response to them. So there's probably two groups of people here. There's some of you that will avoid crucial conversations and you just don't want to have anything to do with them. You'll do everything you can to avoid having an awkward conversation with someone else. Now, that's probably most of us. There's also a group of people here who just want to get the truth out. We just want to dump it on the table. Let's stop messing around. Let's stop beating. Yeah, let's just do it. Let's just put it on the table. Now, the challenge for you guys and girls, ladies, everyone here who like to do that is that sometimes we can actually say things we later regret, and it hurts people. And we don't realize how much hurt we make in those situations where we just dump it all on the table. So I encourage you, if that's you, you've probably actually got to exercise a little bit more patience that Paul's talking about, and perhaps choose the words that you say rather than dumping. You've got to pick a good situation. You've got to put the timing's right to say those things rather than just dumping. But for the rest of us, and that's me, we like to avoid conversations. Often we make what's called the fool's choice, and I think I've got a slide that sums this up pretty nicely. Now, we're tempted to think about our conversations in this way. If we speak the truth, we will lose a friend. If we don't speak the truth, then we'll keep a friend. If we keep silent, we'll keep a friend. And we call this the fool's choice because there's actually a third option. These two choices that we think we have about our conversations kind of assumes the outcome before we start them. So we assume that if we have this conversation with this person, we will lose that relationship. But there's actually a third option, and that is that we can share the truth and keep a friend. And that's something to keep in mind with the conversations in your life, that there is actually a third option. You can share the truth and keep a friend. And having crucial conversations is all about that. So the better we get at it, the more easily we'll go to that third option. We won't avoid. We'll actually go there and have a conversation with that person. Now, Paul's challenge towards the end of the passage reminds us of the third choice in verse 14 to 15. And he says, we will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever they sound like the truth. Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more like Christ. So often it's not other people's lies. So often it's the lies we tell ourselves. We'll lose that friendship if we say that. We can't say that to them because they're going to walk away. We tell ourselves these lies. But, as Paul says, speak the truth in love. That's all crucial conversations. It's saying the truth in love. Now, that's a lot easier to say than to do. It's easier to say that. It's really hard to do it. There's a few things I've picked up over the years that will help us have those conversations. The first thing I've sort of learned over the years is people hear how you say something just as much as what you say. The tone of voice matters just as much as what you're actually saying. If you say something lovely in an angry voice, well, it doesn't really matter what you've said. All the person's heard is this angry voice. Body language matters. When you're having conversations with people, body language matters. My wife tells me that when I get annoyed, my eyebrows just get raised, just like this, and they just sit there permanently like this, and I don't know why. Sometimes I don't even feel it. But and now I'm trying not to do that now as I'm speaking. And you're looking at my eyebrows, so that's lovely. I trimmed them just the other day. Of course, you've got to choose your language carefully, don't you? You've got to choose your language carefully. When you're having a crucial conversation, don't generalize. Don't say you always do that or you never do that. Maybe start with how it makes you feel. Stick to the facts in a conversation and how those facts are making you feel. Because remember, back to the start, you can't change someone else. You can only change yourself. So start with how that situation's making you feel. When it comes to crucial conversations, often the lies are in the assumptions as well. You might assume someone else's bad motives, or they might assume your bad motives. And you need to clarify what the shared truth is between you. Because sometimes you're actually all on the same page. You want the same thing. You're just coming at it from different directions. So saying something, well, what is it we both want out of this conversation? What is it we both want? That might be more a relationship question, potentially, than a question with your boss, but not necessarily. because there might be a task that needs to be done that the boss wants you to do, or something like that. What is it we both want out of the situation? Remember the goal, becoming more like Christ. So in our conversations, you really need to be thinking, is this leading someone towards Jesus or away from Jesus? We're talking about green term earlier. That's all about those conversations down at Levers. Is this conversation leading someone towards Jesus? You don't know where that person's at in their faith. Likewise, some of the conversations around us, we don't know where people are at sometimes. But are our conversations leading people towards Jesus or away from him? Particularly in the way we're acting, in the way we're feeling, in the things we're saying. And sometimes conversations, I've learned, aren't necessarily about the thing you're talking about either. There could be another side issue that's actually triggering this conversation. And I've seen that so often in places I work, where a boss will be so riled up about something, and it's actually not about that thing. It's about something else happening in another part of the company, and the boss has just walked in and he's just unloaded on you because he's just in a bad mood. And that gives me a different perspective when I know something like that's happened, because it's like, okay, well, that's okay. I don't need to get worked up about this conversation. I can let him say the things he wants to say, and I know next time he comes in, he will have forgotten all about that anyway, so we'll just leave it like that. But sometimes our conversations aren't actually about that thing. It's about something else that's triggered it. And depending on your relationship with that person, you might need to ask some questions and dig a bit deeper with them and find out, well, what's actually going on? Why is this an issue? And that brings us to the next tool in having our better conversations. The last one we're looking at tonight is actually keeping your focus in a crucial conversation is so key. So you notice in our example at the beginning of the night, me and Xanthi, we started talking about this bin that was full, and somehow we got onto, what did we talk about? We talked about parking spaces, and then we talked about living arrangements, and we got way sidetracked from the messy house, and so we really got sidetracked. We didn't keep focused in that conversation. We just brought up issue after issue. We didn't stay back to what was the actual issue. Maybe that wasn't actually the issue in the first place. Like we talked about, it could have been something else triggering it, but we got sidetracked. It's hard to stay focused in a crucial conversation. Someone says a generalization, you always do that, and all of a sudden, bang, it's triggered you, and you go off on a tangent, or something like that. You start arguing about something entirely different. We have to stay focused if we want crucial conversations to finish well, to end well, to start well. So the question I usually ask about crucial conversations, what is the issue I really want to get understanding from? I sense this person is getting really worked out. What is the main issue that we need to stick to here? There's lots of peripherals that have been brought up, but what's the main issue that we're talking about here? Remember, our goal is to become like Christ. Not to be right, not to prove ourselves or to vindicate ourselves as being right, but we must seek to be more like Christ and to help the other person know Jesus. Help them to become more like Jesus as well. When you feel like you're getting distracted in your conversations and it's going off in tangent, you actually need to stop and pause and ask that question, what do I really need? What do I really want to get out of this conversation? Can I share the truth and keep the friendship? And if that's what I really want, if I want to stick to the thing that I want to talk about, what am I not going to argue with right now? What am I going to just let slide? We'll deal with that another day, but we need to focus on this thing right now. What is it that I'm prepared to give up in order to keep this conversation where it needs to be right now? I had a great example of this from Sportsfest just over the weekend. And I talked to some of the leaders about keeping lights out at a pretty early time, thinking we had a big day the following day. So this is Saturday night. Sunday was a day full of sports. And so I talked to a couple of the coordinators in our team, and yep, we'd agreed 10 p.m. was a good time for lights out. It was approaching that period. We had some people playing Uno in the middle of our shared dorm of about 60 people with another church. There were some people already in bed. And me and Chris strike up this conversation. And I can't remember how it started, and I've asked Chris if I can share this. But we got into some really friendly banter. And I think at one point, we were talking about lights out. I think at one point I said something like, we need our athletes at peak performance, so we need to go to bed early. And then Chris says something like, in that case, we should be keeping everyone on a strict diet, gesturing to the people playing that were eating chips, I think, at the time. And I'm like, yeah, fair point. So we had a bit of banter back and forth. It was quite fun. And we sort of finished that conversation kind of agreeing to disagree, although we didn't really say that at the time. We were too polite for that. But here's the thing. So Chris comes back after about 5 minutes, and his tone of voice changes. It was really gentle, and he says to me, do you know I remembered about Sports Fest 2 years ago? It wasn't who I played sports with. It wasn't the sports. It was the hang times outside of that. And I feel like we're missing that if we go to bed too early. And I agreed with him. I was like, yeah, I totally agree. It's about community. But then we've also got these people that want to go to bed. We're in a shared space with other churches. And the reason I share this is because he stayed focused on the real thing. And it was actually me that was bringing up all these peripheral stuff that wasn't important. But Chris stayed focused on that thing he wanted to talk about, the event he got to. And that was a great example of staying focused on a conversation. Then, because Sunday night we did go out a bit later and had some great times. Sunday night as a team, or some of our team at least, we might have set a new record on the Flying Fox down at Bunbury, I'm not sure. But maybe even a new tradition down there as well. But it's just a great example of staying focused on a conversation. And it wasn't like super deep, but it was decisive. It had an effect on other people. We were having fun banter as well. There was a bit of adrenaline going on there as we were going back and forth. And so it was a type of crucial conversation. But it's really easy to start arguing about things that aren't the main point in conversations. Think about perhaps conversations about faith with your friends at uni or work. Think about how those conversations can get derailed onto things that really just aren't pointing people to Jesus. And how do you bring them back to that? How do you go like, yes, the church has done some terrible things in the past, but look at Jesus. Or, but have you read the Gospels? Have you read how he healed people and cared for the marginalized? There's ways you can bring a crucial conversation about faith back to the things that really matter, back to pointing people to Jesus. And I want to encourage you in that space. I don't think someone's going to become a Christian based on how good your argument is about a theological point, about a doctrine of the church. I don't think they're going to become a Christian based on that. But they are going to watch how you live, how you work, your conversations outside of that. They're going to watch all those things, as well as your crucial conversations with them. And one day they may accept an invitation to the gospel. Whether that means coming to church, whether it means going to Sports Fest, whatever it might be, we need to look for those invitations that we can bring up in conversations as well. But I share that because I want to just take the pressure off those conversations. Because in the big scheme of things, God is going to grow his church. Sure, we're partners with that. And you're a very important part of God growing his church in the places you go and the people you talk to. But there's so many how you live is so much more important, I think, than some of those conversations that we think we have to get absolutely right when it comes to issues of faith. So I encourage you, stay focused in your crucial conversations. When it comes to conversations of faith about Jesus to the people outside of faith, keep the conversations about Jesus. Sure, there's peripherals. You can engage with those, but keep in the back of your mind, look, I want to bring it back to Jesus because he's perfect. The church isn't perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. But our job, our calling is to point people towards Jesus and to become more like him ourselves. So let me just wrap up there. When it comes to crucial conversations, your heart is so important in crucial conversations. Your motives, your insecurity or security will determine a lot about how you approach those conversations. And how you respond to conversations are important, knowing that perhaps you're a serial conversation avoider, or perhaps you're a conversation dumper, whatever it might be. Knowing that is super important, Because if you aren't aware of that, the chances are you'll be surprised more often than not with those conversations. They just pop up without you even knowing. And thirdly, remain focused. Don't chase down their generalizations. Don't argue about the non-important things. Keep your conversations on topic. Keep your eyes on the gospel, the good news of Jesus, and how you can point people back to him in your conversations. And I'll finish with the fact that there's always hope. There's always forgiveness in Jesus. And Jesus is bigger than any of your mistakes that you've made. Because I think when we come to these conversations, we reflect on the ones that went badly a lot. And I've been thinking about this week as I've been preparing. I thought, what conversations could I share? What crucial conversations? And all I could think for a long time was the bad ones. And to be honest, I can't really share many of them in front of you because they didn't end well. And I want to keep those conversations confidential. But it's easy to bring up those bad conversations. Oh, that person asked about the Bible and I just didn't have an answer or whatever it might be. Those conversations sometimes can haunt us. But the good news is Jesus is bigger than your mistakes. And he puts people in places, regardless of that even. He trusts you with conversations. So I just want to encourage you with that. Don't stop having conversations of faith with those people you know around you for fear of making mistakes. Because there's always a new day. There's always a fresh hope. Jesus is bigger than our mistakes and our conversations that we have. Let me just pray as we finish tonight. Father, we thank you that you trust us with your gospel. Father, we also just recognize the weight of that mission you've given each of us to be your hands and feet. I pray for each of us in our conversations, even this week, that you would give us the courage to have the conversations that we need to have, perhaps the ones we're avoiding. That you would give us courage to take a step in the right direction of perhaps addressing some of those things in our life that we need to have, whether it's family, whether it's friends, work, relationships, whatever area it might be. Pray you give us courage. I pray your Spirit would minister to each of us, give us peace, even if we are facing anxiety about those situations. We thank you also, Father, that there is hope beyond the conversations that might not have gone as well in our lives. And that you continue to trust us with your gospel, even despite those conversations in some situations. Father, thank you that you continue to trust us. And I pray for each of us in our conversations this week, that we would experience your peace in the midst of those conversations. And that we can continue being your hands and feet, not just in our conversations, but the things we do, in the way we treat people and the way we love people. May we become more like you. May we as a church community here become more like you in our unity, in the conversations we have around this place. That even though we might not all agree or have the same views, but that we're unified around your mission, Jesus. And we can accept each other's points of view. And we can be unified around you, Jesus, because you are perfect. What you've done for us is amazing and life-changing. And we want to share that with our local community around here and to all that would come, all that would listen. We thank you so much for that message that you trust us with. In your name, Jesus, amen.